I think my mother-in-law knew that I was going to write her obituary. When she died, I sat down at her desk, and really neat written out there were all of the people in her family, where they were born, where they died, and a list of her jobs and a list of the places she lived. But over to the right, I looked and I saw her chair. And on her chair sat the New York Times crossword puzzle and her pencil. And right next to that was a stack of neatly clipped coupons. And I thought, there she is. I found her. That's Rosemary. So here's what I wrote. After completing the New York Times crossword puzzle and clipping her last coupon, Rosemary Butterworth died in the arms of her loving husband, Joe, leaving us with clear instructions about how to live a meaningful life. Keep your mind clear and your priorities straight. Spend your money and your time with your children and your grandchildren. Search for treasures at garage sales, and remember, the asking price is just a starting point. Don't you feel like you kind of know her now? Yeah. And that's how she lived. She really taught our family the value, especially the value of saving our precious resources, our time and our money, so that we could spend it well. And that will be passed on. That's being passed on to my children, my grandchildren. That is Rosemary's legacy. I have, in my professional life, I have the honor of helping grieving families, grieving parents, find meaning in their loss. And part of that is writing those really tough obituaries. And part of it is really creating and forging legacies forever. And interesting, I was having my own legacy crisis. I've been doing this for so long, but I was in my own legacy crisis a few years ago. And I'll give you a little context. I started an organization, Jacob's Heart, to support children with cancer and their families. And it was on the brink of folding. I had poured my time, my money, my resources, everything important to me into that. So I went to see my mentor, and I sat at his table, and I was crying in a puddle of tears and pain, and I said, if Jacob's Heart goes away, my legacy will be gone. And he said, why did you start it in the first place? I said, I started Jacob's Heart so that no family of a child with cancer would ever have to go through it alone. I started Jacob's Heart to touch lives and alleviate suffering. And he said, have you done that? I said, yeah. He said, well, that's your legacy. Your legacy is not the organization. The legacy is your impact. So I started to rethink how I was leading Jacob's Heart, and I stopped making it about keeping the organization together and really focusing on impact. And the organization, Jacob's Heart, flourished, and so did I. And I started to really think about this whole idea of legacy, and that's what I want to share with you tonight. So whenever you really study something, where do you go? You go to Webster's, right? You got to check out Webster's. So here's what Webster's has to say about legacy. The first two it has three definitions, and the first two have to do with passing on something material, your money, or it's like a bequest. And that's really important. All of us should do that. That's one type of legacy. The third definition here has to do with getting into the college or fraternity that your parents were in. And that has really nothing to do with what we've been talking about. So tonight I want to challenge us to sort of, let's expand our thinking about legacy, to broaden it beyond the Webster's definition, because I'll tell you, you do not have to be old and wealthy to have a legacy. Last July, I was sitting with a family around a table, and we were having a conversation, and I turned on my recorder, and I asked them a tough question. I said, what do you want the world to remember about Alex? Alex was 11 and a half. We had just celebrated his 11 and a half birthday because we knew he wasn't going to be 12. Alex died of cancer. And I was sitting with his family to write his obituary. and to forge a meaningful legacy. And let me introduce you to Alex. There he is. A free-spirited philosopher well beyond his years, Alex McCrone, taught us how to love, how to say I'm sorry, and how to forgive. During his final days, Alex shared words to spread far and wide. A world without love is impossible. A world without love is impossible. Those were the words he spoke to me on his deathbed. What a legacy for an 11-and-a-half-year-old boy. A very short life. And he wasn't wealthy, but he has a legacy. So, what's Steve Jobs' legacy? I think it's sitting in your pocket right now, right? It's in your purse, and you can't wait to get it out until I'm done talking, and you're gonna, text your friends. Every time you do that, you're living Steve Jobs' legacy, because what meant so much to him during his life was to connect us through technology. So that's his legacy. So now, I want you to raise your hand if you think Mother Teresa has a legacy. Raise your hand. Let's see him. Not according to Webster's. Mother Teresa didn't have a big bequest, and she certainly didn't get her kids into any fancy college, right? So Martin Luther King, he died young. He gave away all his money before he died. He gave away his Nobel Prize money before he died. But his legacy is seared into our consciousness. Okay, I got a complicated legacy for you. You ready? You know that guy? Who is that? Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein is on trial right now because he used his resources, his time, his power, and his money to manipulate and abuse women. The problem with Harvey Weinstein's legacy is that he's living an incongruent life. And I'll tell you, to have an intact legacy, you got to have an intact life. So ask yourself this question. Here's a question. Am I living the life that I want to be remembered for? That's tough, because it requires us to think about our mortality. It also requires us to really think about our values and to think, are we living according to our values? How do you know? Well, my mother-in-law gave us a good formula. How are you spending your time and your money? How you spend your time and your money is the best reflection out into the world about the things that are really important to you. So think about it like this. Imagine a thread out in front of you. And that thread represents the things that are important to you, your values, what is meaningful. And imagine taking that thread and weaving it through the tapestry of your life, pulling together all the pieces of you, the person that you are at work, the person that you are in public, the person that you are with your family, the person that you are with your friends, and the person that you are with yourself. If that thread is intact and strong, you can even take it and go back into past times in your life and pick up those dropped stitches. You know, those fractured relationships and those mistakes, and you can take those and weave those back into that tapestry so the tapestry of your life is intact. And you know what happens then if you have that kind of a tapestry of life? You don't really have to worry about your legacy. But if that thread is frayed and it breaks under pressure and you weave your life together with that, you know what happens, right? Someone's going to pick up that drop stitch. Everything will just kind of flop out into fragmented pieces. Someone might randomly pick up one of those pieces and say, oh yeah, that's what we're going to remember her by. That might not be what you want to be remembered for. You're not going to be remembered for the thoughts that you have, the things that go on in your head. You're not even going to be remembered for your ideas unless you're willing to share them. You will be remembered for what you do and what you build, especially those relationships. Because someday, I don't know when, might be tomorrow. It might be in 50 years. It might be in 75 years. We don't know. Someone's going to sit down at your desk, like I did at Rosemary's desk, and they're going to write your obituary. Will they find that thread that will weave together the final story of your life the way you want it to be told? How about we leave tonight with a commitment to strengthening our threads so that we can start to weave them together and weave them with one another, and to begin to live the legacy we want to leave tomorrow morning. When you wake up and you look at the day and you realize that your days are numbered. They really are. I mean, that's the truth. Our days are numbered. But that's what makes them so valuable. And maybe we can, rise ourselves each day grateful for the opportunity to experience and live this beautiful gift called life. Thank you for listening. Thank you.